My name is Mara, and my family didn't just abandon me, they obliterated me from their world, as if I'd never existed. When I became a divorced single mom, they held a secret meeting to carve up our legacy, and I wasn't even invited to the table. Then they sold the seaside villa, and my father's sacred promise to us all, without a whisper to me, cashing the payment while I was left in the dark. So I gathered my kids and fled to a decaying cottage no one else dared touch. But what we uncovered in that forgotten hearth didn't just change our lives, it shattered the facade they'd built to bury me. Before we unravel this, tell me, when are you reading this and from where? Drop a comment. I read every single one. The drizzle had soaked through the parcel by the time I reached the veranda. My fingers were numb, not from the chill, but from how fast everything had changed. I looked at the cottage. Sagging roof, cracked step, windows like clouded eyes, and a door that leaned in its frame like it had long given up on standing straight. Behind me, Theo huffed as he dragged a suitcase up the steps. "Is this really it?" he asked, blinking rain from his lashes. Nora clung to her soaked, stuffed bear, the one thing she wouldn't stow away. I crouched beside her and whispered, "It's not much, but it's ours." I didn't say the rest, because I had nowhere else left to go. Just 4 weeks ago, I was still someone's wife, still pretending I belonged at the family gathering. But that illusion shattered faster than I expected. It started with a luncheon. Mom had arranged it just for the women. I showed up in a fresh blouse and feigned optimism. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The sideways glance Lila gave me, the too tight smile from Esme. I was seated at the children's table with my 2 kids, shoved into a corner by the French door. Meanwhile, my sisters sipped Pinot Grigio and shared private jests at the main table with Mom. Lila leaned toward Esme, her voice dripping with venom. "Look at her, still clinging to that sad little life," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. Esme smirked, twirling her glass. "She's a ghost now, Lila. Let's keep it that way." I kept pretending I didn't care, until I heard Lila's voice float back, soft but cutting. "She's not even really family anymore. She couldn't even keep her marriage intact." It hit harder than I'd expected. I looked at my son across the table, digging into pancakes like nothing was wrong, and felt something fracture. Later, when no one noticed I'd slipped away, I crept up to the loft, dust swirling in beams of light that barely reached the corners. I knew exactly where it was. A porcelain teacup, delicate and ornate, wrapped in a cloth I had hidden as a teenager. It had belonged to Grandma Clara, the only person who ever said to me, "You deserve a place that sees you." I cradled it in my palms like a secret. It was the only part of that villa I would take with me. As I held it, a memory surged. Clara's voice, fierce and low, years ago. "Mara, they'll try to erase you. They did it to me. Promise me you'll fight." I'd been too young to understand then, but now, her words burned. That night I got the email forwarded from a cousin who didn't know I was in the dark. It was a legal confirmation. The seaside villa, Dad's pride, the place we were promised we'd all share, had been sold, already closed, already paid, the buyer's funds long deposited. My name on a single form. I sat on my bed, kids asleep, and stared at that email until the screen dimmed, and I stood, walked to the wardrobe, and started pulling out bags. Not one word to my mother, not to Leela, not to Esme. They knew what they did. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me bleed. Now here I was on this veranda, holding everything I had left in one damp parcel. I slid the old key into the lock. Click. The door groaned open like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the air smelled of decay, mold, and something sweeter, older, like memories that didn't belong to me. I stepped inside, dropped the parcel, and wiped my shoes on the mat someone had left behind. Home sweet home. Nora wandered in behind me. "Are we going to live here forever?" "Just long enough to fix it," I said, even though I didn't know what that meant yet. Theo stepped in, holding the torch we brought from the car. He scanned the room, then turned toward the brick hearth. "Mom," he said, voice low, "there's something in the hearth." I walked slowly toward the hearth, brushing past. "Stay back, honey," I murmured. He nodded and took a cautious step behind Nora, who was still clutching her bear, staring with wide eyes. The hearth was thick with ash, the kind that felt like it had been sitting untouched for decades. I knelt, bracing my hand on the cold stone, and reached in. At first I thought it was just more debris, burnt logs, maybe some old papers. But then my fingers tapped against metal. Something small, square. I pulled it out with both hands. A rusted tin box coated with soot. It wasn't locked. I eased the lid open. Inside were 9 letters. The ink was smudged in some places, the edges yellowed by time. Each envelope was addressed in delicate, flowing handwriting that punched the breath right out of me. "To Mara, for when you're ready," all signed with a single name. Grandma Iris. I sat down on the bare wooden floor, not caring about the dust or the way my trousers clung to my wet knees. With trembling fingers, I lifted the top envelope. A small dried lavender sprig was clipped to the corner. I recognized it. She used to press them into journals, saying, "A flower lasts longer when it's loved quietly." I opened the letter. "Happy 30th, my dear girl. If your mother still refuses to give you what's yours, don't give up. The seaside villa is meant to be your sanctuary, not your exile. Don't let them take it from you." Another letter, dated a year later, was sharper. "Mara, they're lying to you. I saw your mother forge my signature on papers to cut you out. She thinks you're weak, but you're my blood. Prove her wrong." I stared at those words until they blurred. The rain outside pounded harder on the roof, or maybe that was just my heartbeat. All this time, I thought I was the only one who saw how I was treated differently. Thought I'd made it up, overreacted, but here it was, proof. She saw it too. I read the second letter next, and that's when my fingers froze. Inside was a photocopy, a grainy scanned version of what looked like a legal document, an early draft of my grandmother's will. I scanned the lines, my eyes darting over the formal language. Iris Thornton, leave the coastal property located at, and then there it was, clear as day, to my granddaughter, Mara Thornton Lane, no mention of Lila. No shared ownership, just my name alone. But that's not what the final will had said. A folded note slipped out. Iris's handwriting again. "They switched the will, Mara. I trusted your mother, but she betrayed us both. Find the original. It's hidden where the lavender grows." I remembered the week after Grandma passed. Mom had arranged the service fast, too fast. She told me not to worry about the logistics and kept handing me my kids like they were shields to distract me. I didn't see the final will. I never even thought to ask. And now this. I looked down at the letters spread across my lap, each one a tiny wound and a balm all at once. In one stroke, my mother and sisters had erased me, not just from a room, but from a legacy. But Grandma hadn't forgotten. She'd written these words to me for me, and someone had hidden them here deliberately. I didn't cry. I gathered the letters, tucked them back into the metal box, and stood. Theo was watching me. He didn't ask what I found. He just said, "Are we still staying here?" I nodded. "Yeah, we are." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the hearth, clutching the box, and whispered to Iris's ghost, "You saw me when no one else did. I won't let them win." The silence answered, heavy with promise. Morning crept through the broken shutters, casting pale strips of light across the living room floor. I hadn't slept. The letters were still on the table, sealed again, but my mind kept replaying the same sentence like a quiet drumbeat. She meant for me to have it. I wandered into the back room while the kids were eating dry cereal from paper bowls. I was looking for light bulbs, maybe a wrench, anything that made this place feel less like a ghost's attic and more like a home. I pushed open a narrow utility closet wedged behind the hallway door and started rummaging through old paint cans, brittle scrub brushes, rusted hinges. That's when I found the photo. It was behind a roll of plastic tarp, the frame cracked on one side, buried beneath years of grime. I wiped it clean with the edge of my shirt. It was us, my family, taken maybe 10 years ago at the seaside villa. Everyone was there. My mother in her pale green shawl, Leela with her usual practiced smile, Esme cradling her toddler daughter. And there I was too, or rather, there I should have been. My spot far left was scratched out, not torn, not faded, but scratched with purpose. The outline of my skirt was still visible, a hand on someone's shoulder, but my face had been gouged out of the print. A sticky note was tucked into the frame's edge. Lila's handwriting. No room for failures. My blood boiled. This wasn't just erasure. It was a declaration of war. I just stood there holding the frame, Viper. The smell of burnt toast pulled me back. I leaned the photo against the counter, washed my hands and poured myself a mug of lukewarm tea. But my head was already somewhere else years back. I remembered the community picnic the first summer after my divorce. I hadn't told many people why we'd split. It wasn't their business. And honestly, I was still too shell-shocked to explain anything clearly, but Mom, I walked up behind her as she chatted with some of the temple ladies and heard her say, "Mara's not well right now. We've tried everything to help her." A hand on her heart, a tilt of the head. I remember standing there in my own garden, holding a tray of cookies Nora had decorated, while a woman I barely knew nodded solemnly and said, "Poor thing, I hope she gets the help she needs." Later that day, Esme cornered me by the dessert table. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed. "Stop acting like a victim and get your life together, or we'll make sure no one here trusts you again." And just like that, I became a rumor. A few days later, a client I'd been freelancing for emailed to say the project was canceled. Just concerns around availability, they said. But the timing stung. Calls stopped coming in. Invites dried up. I wasn't unstable. I was discarded. I finished my tea and went back for the photo. Stared at it for a long minute. No, this wasn't neglect. This was active erasure. Strategic silence. They didn't want to fix things. They wanted me gone without the mess of a fight, without accountability. They didn't want me back. They wanted me erased, quietly. Lila's voice popped into my head, not from a specific day, just one of her many rehearsed lectures. "You always make things messy, Mara. Why can't you just let Mom take care of the narrative?" The narrative. They didn't lie by accident. They lied well, with polish, with precision. They painted me as a burden so no one would ever ask what they did. I grabbed a pen and a torn piece of notepad, wrote one sentence, folded it once, then again, and slid it behind the warped frame. They told the world I was broken, so no one would ask who broke me. Then I returned the photo to where I found it, not to hide it, but to mark the truth in the same place they tried to bury the lie. Before closing the closet, I whispered to the photo, "You thought you could rewrite me, Lila. Watch me rewrite you." The next morning, I forced myself back into town. We needed supplies. The water heater groaned like it was 80 years old, which it probably was, and the front door still stuck in the frame. I figured a new spanner and a roll of weather stripping might be a good place to start. Theo was at school, Nora with the neighbor's teen son down the road, and I had about 3 hours before pickup. It felt strange to walk around freely again without glances tracking my every step, until I reached the sidewalk in front of the hardware store. A pair of women leaned against the window display, talking low. When they saw me, one of them turned, the other looked away too quickly. I gave a tight nod, kept walking. I'd grown familiar with that twitch in people's eyes, a mix of pity and something uglier. Not curiosity, containment, like they'd all been handed the same script about me and didn't know how to improvise if I walked on stage. One of them whispered as I passed, "That's the one Lila warned us about, unhinged." I spun around, voice steady. "If I'm unhinged, it's because my family bolted me out of my own life. Care to hear the real story?" They froze, then scurried off, but the fire in my chest only grew. Inside, I grabbed a small cart and moved through the aisles mechanically. Tape, screws, work gloves. It was almost peaceful in the back section until I heard the door chime again and a slow shuffle behind me. Mara. I turned. Mr. Brennan? He hadn't changed much, thinner maybe, a little more stooped. But the same wiry gray hair and kind, unsure eyes. He was my father's friend, a retired surveyor who used to come by the seaside villa in the summers, sipping lemonade with Dad over maps spread across the garden table. Mr. Brennan, I said gently. I wasn't sure it was you, he murmured, stepping closer. His voice carried hesitation. I heard you were back. Didn't want to pry. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. He cleared his throat, fiddling with a folded receipt in his fingers. I don't want to stir anything up, he began, but I saw what they did to you back then, and I said nothing. That's on me. My brows furrowed. What do you mean? He glanced around, then motioned toward the parking lot. Can you, just a minute? We walked out together. He led me to his van parked under a tree with peeling bark. From the back seat, he pulled out a dusty black tube and handed it to me. I was supposed to throw this out, he said. Your mother brought it over years ago. Said it was hers and she didn't want it cluttering the place, but I couldn't. I knew. I unscrewed the cap. Inside was a large, worn blueprint, thicker paper, yellowed at the edges. I unrolled it slowly on the hood of the van. The title block had her name typed neatly, but as my eyes scanned the margins, I saw it. My handwriting, notes in pencil, measurements in my shorthand, even my name initialed in the corner. Your father gave this to me when you were 16, Mr. Brennan said. Told me the idea came from you two, some kind of retreat center for women starting over. He said it was your dream. He lowered his voice. Your mother came to me after he died, Mara. She begged me to burn it. Said you didn't deserve to carry his vision. I couldn't do it. I traced a faint pencil line with my fingertip. My chest tightened. He told me you were the only one who saw what was missing in that family, Mr. Brennan continued. He said you were the one who'd build something better. I remembered that summer sitting on the floor in our garage, sketching bungalows, imagining shared dining halls and quiet verandas where women could feel safe again. My father encouraged it, my mother not so much. Helping broken women just means you stay broken, too. She'd snapped once when she saw our sketches. You're too soft, Mara, just like your grandmother. She'd grabbed one of my drawings and tore it in half, her eyes cold. This is a fantasy, Mara. You'll never be more than a shadow in this family. Looking at the blueprint now, I realized they didn't just erase me from stories. They erased me from purpose, from legacy. They used my ideas, my vision, and rewrote history to make them theirs. Mr. Brennan placed a hand on the blueprint's edge. I'm sorry I stayed silent. I rolled it back up slowly, tucking it under my arm like something fragile that had survived a fire. It's okay, I said, though it wasn't. You didn't bury it? That's more than I can say for most. He gave a quiet nod, then stepped back into the van and drove off. I stood there for a long moment before walking back to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But something had settled in me, a shift. She'd erased me from the legacy I helped build. So, I began laying a new foundation. Quietly, I left Mr. Brennan's van that day with the blueprint hugged tight against my chest. The wind picked up as I walked back to my car, but the chill didn't touch me. Something in me had shifted quietly, decisively, not out of anger, out of truth. And I wasn't about to bury it again. 3 days later, an invitation arrived, taped to my front door. A playful rocket sticker clung to the corner of the envelope, covering a smudge. My niece's 5th birthday. The party would be held at the villa I used to mop floors in, hang drapes in, half mine, though you'd never know it now. For a long minute, I stared at the card. I didn't want to go. My gut said no. But I did anyway. Not for them. For the girl who once called me her favorite aunt. and for closure, if that's what people called walking into a fire you knew would burn you again, just so you'd remember how hot it really. I called Esme that night, testing the waters. "Will it be safe for me to come?" I asked. Her laugh was sharp. "Safe? Mara, don't flatter yourself. You're not important enough to be a threat." The line went dead. The day of the party, I parked down the lane, hands still on the steering wheel even after the engine cut. The lawn was manicured to perfection, fresh paint, garden lights already glowing even though the sun was still up. That villa used to creak and sigh with memory. Now it looked like a showroom, everything polished, everything pretending. I walked up the path carrying a box I'd spent 3 nights sanding, staining, and carving. Inside was a handcrafted wooden toy barn, complete with tiny animals and a gate Theo helped me design. When Lila opened the door, her smile tightened like a drawstring bag. "Look who made it," she said too brightly. I nodded once. "Where should I put this?" "Oh, somewhere. I'll figure it out." I found the birthday girl, gave her the box, and her eyes lit up. She ran to show her friends, and for a moment I let myself breathe until the cake came out. Everyone gathered in the garden, clustered around the long table under strings of fairy lights. Lila clinked her glass. "I just want to say," she began, swaying slightly in her sandals, "how grateful I am for family. Real family, the kind that sticks around. The kind that doesn't fall apart when things get hard." A few guests laughed softly. I looked down. "And a special thank you to those of us who still believe in commitment. Not everyone gets to bring a +1 these days." "Oh, wait." She tilted her glass toward me. "Never mind," Esme chimed in, voice syrupy. "Some people just don't know how to hold on to love, do they, Mara?" That landed, a ripple of muffled snickers. One woman choked on her Prosecco. I stood slowly. The scraping of the chair legs cut through the air louder than the music in the background. My voice was even, not loud, not shaky. "I may not be married anymore," I said, "but I still know what's mine." Lila blinked, her glass frozen midair. "And you know what I'm talking about," I added, eyes locked on hers. 2 weeks. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. A few guests stared between us, like they'd walked into the middle of a scene they weren't supposed to see. Our mother shifted uncomfortably near the bar cart. No one moved. I didn't wait for anyone to catch up. I turned, walked back through the villa, heels tapping against the new tiled floors she probably had installed just to erase my footprints. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. But every step out of that villa felt like a stake planted in new soil. Not this time. No silence. No more erasing. She thought I was bluffing. She didn't know I had already spoken to the district clerk. I drove to the district courthouse early that Wednesday, hours before the office opened, sitting in my car with the envelope on my lap, like it might vanish if I let it out of sight. Inside was my late Aunt Fiona's trust clause, one she'd quietly amended 6 years ago, a clause no one had bothered to look for because no one thought I mattered enough to be written into anything. When the doors opened, I was first in line. The clerk, a kind-minded woman named Beatrice, walked me through the filing process. "It'll go to legal review," she said, flipping through the notarized pages. "But it's valid. Most people forget about trust-embedded ownership clauses. Lucky you found it." It wasn't luck, it was survival. By noon, the claim was officially in motion. They had no idea yet, but that villa, the one with the newly landscaped garden in the wine cellar Leela had installed, was now under legal dispute. That afternoon, I got a text from Leela. "You're pathetic, Mara. This stunt won't change a thing. We own that villa, and you're nothing." I didn't reply. Let her stew. 3 days later, they found out. I was restocking shelves at the local bookstore when the double glass doors swung open hard enough to rattle the display stand. Lila marched in like a courtroom scene in boots. Behind her, our mother trailed close, lips tight, eyes flicking from left to right like she was looking for an exit. "You think this is funny?" Lila snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice the quiet. I kept my hand on the spine of a book I hadn't shelved yet. Excuse me. The villa. The filing. You're trying to steal it out from under us just because your marriage didn't work out. I glanced around. 2 patrons pretended to be deeply fascinated by the travel section. I pulled a copy of the trust clause from my bag and handed it over. This was filed last week. Aunt Fiona made sure I had a fallback. Turns out she knew how this family operated. Mom flinched slightly at that. Lila barely read it before tossing it on the counter. "This doesn't mean anything," came a voice from behind them. Gideon, Lila's husband. He sauntered in with a smirk that curled like smoke. "You think a dusty piece of paper changes the fact we've been maintaining that villa for years? Remodeling it, paying the taxes, living in it?" Lila stepped closer, her voice a hiss. "You're a leech, Mara. Always have been. You think you can waltz in and claim what we've built? I'll burn that villa down before I let you have it." "It's funny," I said, voice even, "how generous you all got after the deed was lost, especially since that dusty paper proves I was legally entitled to it from the beginning." Gideon chuckled. "This will never hold up." I tilted my head. "Depends who you're trying to impress, your garden party friends or the judge." A silence fell, the kind that pulls everything down with it. Mom finally stepped forward, voice low but sharp. "You're tearing this family apart, Mara." I looked at her. Really looked. The way she clutched her purse strap, the way her necklace still matched her shoes even on a day like this. "No," I said, "you tore it apart the moment you started editing your own daughter out of the truth. The moment you decided a prettier story was worth more than me." Lila looked away. Gideon scoffed and turned on his heel. But Mom just stood there, rooted, as if my words had sunk somewhere deeper than she was ready to acknowledge. They left without saying another word. The bookstore door closed behind them like punctuation. That night, I sat on the front steps of my new temporary cottage, watching Nora draw chalk stars on the pavement. Theo was inside reading. For the first time in a long while, my hands weren't shaking. This wasn't about winning. It was about being seen on record in ink. They still thought I wouldn't go all the way until the court summons arrived. And even then, I imagine they assumed it was a bluff in a different envelope. It was a crisp Thursday morning, the kind where the mist rolls in low across the hills and everything feels suspended in breath. I didn't see it happen, but I didn't need to. Lila told me everything without knowing she had. I'd parked 2 streets over, just far enough to keep eyes off me, and waited. At exactly 10:15 AMU, the process server made his way up the steps of the villa I once called home. He knocked once, then twice. I saw the curtain shift. A moment later, Lila cracked the door open, eyes squinting, arms folded. I watched her lips move. "Yes." He handed her a thick envelope, nodded politely, and turned away before she could close the door on his back. From my vantage point, I saw it all. The way her body locked up, the rigid grip on the envelope, the slow, deliberate read of the name printed across it. I could almost hear her breath catch when she realized what it was. My mother appeared behind her, clutching a mug of tea like it could warm whatever part of her had just gone cold. "What did she do now?" she asked. Her voice floated down the veranda like a weary breeze. "She sued us," Lila muttered. They stood there, not speaking, not shouting, just frozen. That silence, it had more weight than every insult they'd hurled at me over the years. That night, my phone lit up with a voicemail from Mom. "Mara, how could you? After everything we've done for you, you drag us to court? You're no daughter of mine." I deleted it without a second thought. That evening, as I later learned from my cousin's offhanded texts, dinner was held in a tension so thick it could have been cut with one of Mom's heirloom butter knives. Nobody touched the grilled salmon. No one passed the bread. Mara's name wasn't mentioned, but she was there. Between every glance, in every sharp sigh, every clink of silverware against porcelain, Back at my place, the air was just as still, but it didn't suffocate, it steadied me. That night, I got a message I wasn't expecting. From Mrs. Carver, our elderly neighbor from 4 doors down. I'd helped her 3 winters ago when her pipes froze. Never asked for anything, never even told her how things were unraveling, but she remembered, and she wrote, "I know what they did, Mara. If it helps, I'll tell it under oath." My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I read it again and again. Her words sliced through the quiet like a bell in a temple. Suddenly a memory rushed in. Me, 18, crouched next to the flower bed, planting dahlias beside Lila. I remember how she laughed. "You and your pathetic little dream cottage," she'd sneered. "You think owning a villa makes you whole again?" Mom had chuckled too, not with cruelty, but that tight-lipped approval that always came when Lila knocked me down a notch. I didn't defend myself that day. I just dug deeper. Years later, Lila had bragged at a family dinner. "I told the lawyer to make sure Mara's name was off everything. She doesn't deserve a dime." Mom had nodded, sipping her wine. "It's cleaner this way." Tonight I sat on my own veranda, dusk painting long shadows across the yard, on my lap, the manila folder holding everything I had left to prove. I opened it to review the contents. The trust clause, the deed copy, the legal papers, and there at the bottom, nestled between pages, was the broken ceramic sparrow I'd found during move-in, still chipped, still cracked. I hadn't meant to keep it, but somehow I had. I ran my thumb over its jagged edge, not to feel pain, but to remember what had been shattered. They broke me, but this is the glue. The courtroom was colder than I imagined, but my voice didn't tremble once. My boots echoed too loudly as I stepped across the polished floor, past strangers and suits and family I once called mine. Lila was already there, sitting next to her attorney with a smile too stiff to be real. Our mother sat a row behind her, gaze fixed on the floor, like she'd dropped something and couldn't bring herself to pick it up. I didn't wear anything fancy, just a dark green blouse and a blazer that still smelled faintly of old pine. I didn't come to impress. I came to be seen, really seen. The judge, an older woman with weary eyes and a voice like steel wrapped in silk, nodded to both counsels. "Let's begin." Lila's attorney went first. He stood tall, voice slick with practiced charm, and held up a folder full of papers like he was about to unveil a masterpiece. "These receipts show that my client, Lila Hensley, funded and oversaw the majority of the renovations on the disputed property. My client invested not just money but vision and care in restoring a structure that would have otherwise collapsed." He clicked the remote and images of polished marble floors, a redone study, and garden trellises appeared on the projector. For a moment it looked damning. Then my attorney rose, quiet, methodical, and prepared. He clicked again. Side-by-side comparisons appeared. On one side, the receipts Lila had submitted. On the other, bank records, contractor logs, time-stamped transfers from my personal account to every vendor Lila claimed she'd paid. "Your Honor," he said gently, "not only did Ms. Marlene fund these renovations herself, but the documents submitted by the defendant were altered. The originals obtained directly from the contractors show no trace of Miss Lila Hensley's name or payment." There was a rustle in the courtroom, papers shifting, throats cleared. Lila crossed her arms, lips pressed thin. Her mother still didn't look up. "And there's more," my attorney added, inserting a USB into the court's monitor system. The video that played was grainy, likely from a motion-activated garden cam, left running without their knowledge. I remembered when we retrieved it. Mrs. Carver had handed it to me with a quiet, firm nod. In the footage, Lila stood at the patio table laughing as she held a clipboard. "She's too dumb to even know we're stealing her name off the deed," she joked. The camera caught my mother in the background, sipping tea, nodding silently. Lila's voice on the tape continued. Once we sell it, Mara will be nothing but a memory we can finally forget." The room chilled further. My stomach clenched, but I didn't flinch. The judge took a moment before looking up. "Ms. Lane," she said, "you may offer closing remarks." I stood, slowly, steadying my breath. My hand found the folder I'd brought with me, and from it I pulled the small, broken ceramic sparrow. The room watched as I held it up as if it held more weight than any affidavit. "This was in the loft when I returned," I said. "Everything else, my name, my share, my place in this family, was torn down, repainted, or signed away. But this—" I turned it slowly, letting the fractured wing glint in the light. "This was left behind. Maybe because it was broken, or maybe because they thought it wasn't worth hiding." I took a breath, but I kept it because it reminds me of who I was before they tried to erase me, before they decided I was the problem. I set it gently on the desk before me. No more words were needed. The room was silent. Even Lila had nothing to say. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the windows. As I sat down, Lila muttered under her breath, loud enough for me to hear, "You'll regret this, Mara." I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Lila, you will." The verdict came on a rainy afternoon. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming what they tried to steal. I walked out of the courthouse without looking back, the judge's ruling still echoing in my ears. Full title transfer, public retraction, damages awarded for defamation and fraud, and with it, my name, my dignity, my home. Behind me, Lila shoved open the heavy doors and stormed down the courthouse steps, heels clapping against the wet concrete like a tantrum, trying to be taken seriously. Her lawyer trailed quietly. Mom stood off to the side, clutching her purse like it could hold back the weight of everything she'd chosen not to say for years. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to beg, but I didn't stop walking, not out of spite, just peace. That was the final thread. And it didn't need to be tied. Later I heard from a mutual friend that Lila had screamed at Mom in the parking lot, "This is your fault. You said Mara would never fight back." Mom had just stood there, silent, as Lila's words echoed into the rain. 3 days later, I pulled into the gravel path of the villa they once tried to pretend I didn't belong in. It looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. Nora was the first to hop out of the car. Her backpack swung behind her like she was running into a holiday cottage, not a villa with layers of pain packed into every corner. "Mom," she called, "can we repaint the hallway teal?" "Sure," I said, smiling. "Pick the shade. Theo can pick the trim." He gave me a look, half eye roll, half grin, but followed his sister inside. The floors creaked the same. The light filtered through the west-facing windows the same. But the feeling that was different. This time we had keys nobody else could take. This time our names were on every doorframe. I spent the next week quietly arranging what mattered. Most of the furniture had been replaced. Lila had stripped it all out before the case, as if removing tables and curtains could erase memories. She couldn't. What was left was mine. The settlement payment arrived in the mail on a Tuesday. Neat, sterile, absurdly large. I stared at it for a while before tucking it into a folder labeled Rebuild. By Saturday, it had a destination. A non-profit in town that worked with women starting over. I sat across from the director, slid the payment across the table, and said only, "Use it to build spaces that don't get stolen out from under people." They asked if I wanted a name on the donor wall. I nodded, "Mara Lane, survivor, builder, mother." I added under my breath, "and the one they couldn't erase." That evening, the ceramic sparrow sat in the kitchen windowsill, its wing repaired with the smallest line of silver resin, barely visible unless you knew where to look. It caught the golden hour light, like it had waited for it all this time. Theo curled next to me on the couch, head resting on my arm. Nora was already asleep, her teal hallway paint chips scattered on the coffee table. "It's good to have a house again," he said softly. I kissed his forehead. "It's good to have a home," I whispered back. Outside, the rain had stopped. The wind smelled like earth and